In 1889, an empire's armies could not move, not because they ran out of bullets, not because they ran out of men, they ran out of oxen. Within a few short years, a disease swept across Africa, killing more than 90% of cattle in some regions. Farms went silent. Plows sat unused in dry fields. And in the years that followed, some historians believe millions of people starved while foreign powers, watching the collapse from a distance, moved in and took control of land that had defied them for generations. An animal most people picture standing quietly in a pasture, chewing grass, staring at nothing, may have helped determine the fate of an entire continent. How does something so calm end up tangled in war, famine, empire, and religion? Stay with this one, because the story starts long before any of that. It starts with a decision so small that nobody who made it could have possibly understood what they were setting in motion. If stories like this one are your thing, this is a good moment to subscribe. Now, back about 10,000 years. Picture a river valley somewhere in what is now Turkey, Iraq, or Iran. The animal in front of these early humans was nothing like a modern dairy cow. Wild aurochs stood well over 6 feet at the shoulder, built like walls of muscle, capable of killing a grown man with a single motion of the head. Hunting one was a gamble most hunters lost more often than they'd like to admit. Somewhere, in a moment lost entirely to history, someone chose not to kill the animal in front of them, but to keep it. Picture the scene as it might have looked: a dry riverbank, the smell of smoke from a low fire, a young aurochs calf too weak or too calm to bolt with the rest of the herd, kept alive instead of eaten. Then someone else did the same. Generation after generation, the calmest, least aggressive animals were the ones people kept alive and bred. Nobody involved understood genetics. Nobody knew they were engineering the future. They were just trying to survive one more season. What they built without meaning to was something closer to a machine than a meal. A living engine of muscle that could pull a wooden plow through soil that human hands alone could barely break, harnessed to an animal that asked for nothing but grass and water. Surplus food followed, and surplus food does something strange to a society. It frees people from the constant, grinding work of finding the next meal. Some became builders, some became priests, some became soldiers, rulers, record keepers, artists. None of it required a single new idea about farming itself. It required an ox in a harness. There was a second gift hidden inside this partnership, one that took much longer to reveal itself: milk. Most adult humans at the time couldn't digest it properly. Somewhere along the way, a genetic mutation appeared in certain populations that let adulthood keep the ability to break down lactose. It sounds like a minor biological footnote. It wasn't. Communities carrying that mutation suddenly had a food source available every single day, not only when an animal was slaughtered. When famine and hard winters swept through, those communities survived at higher rates than their neighbors. Over thousands of years, that one trait spread quietly across parts of Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, reshaping the genetic map of entire populations. A cow did that. Not a king, not a war, a cow. Once food stopped being scarce, something else took its place as the thing people fought to control: ownership. In ancient Sumer, a family's standing wasn't measured in coins, it was measured in the size of its herd. In several ancient languages, the words for money and wealth trace their roots directly to cattle. The Latin word pecunia, meaning money, comes from pecus, meaning livestock. It's a small linguistic fossil, but it hints at something real. In some of the earliest economies on Earth, a cow wasn't just an animal. It was a way of keeping score. And wherever there is a way of keeping score, someone eventually decides to cheat, steal, or fight for a higher number. Cattle raiding became one of the oldest forms of organized violence in human history. Ancient Mesopotamian records describe disputes over herds. In Ireland, one of the most famous stories in Celtic mythology, the Táin Bó Cúailnge, centers entirely on a war triggered by a single legendary bull. Warriors died, kingdoms trembled, all because of livestock. Across East Africa, cattle raiding wove itself so deeply into tribal life that among groups like the Maasai, a young man's path to adulthood, marriage, and social standing could run directly through the herd he managed to acquire. Wealth had created conflict, but it had also created something else: meaning. In Egypt, the goddess Hathor was often shown with the horns and form of a cow, tied to motherhood, fertility, and the heavens themselves. The Apis bull was paraded through the streets of Memphis as a living vessel of the divine and mummified after death with the same care given to a pharaoh. In India, cattle took on an even deeper role, one that never faded. Cows became linked to nourishment, to motherhood, to nonviolence, ideas that moved from religious texts into law and daily life. Under empires like the Mauryas and the Guptas, protecting cattle became tied to ideas of moral duty. A single animal in a single household could provide milk, pull a plow, and supply dung that was dried and burned as fuel or spread as fertilizer. An early, self-sustaining energy source most families never had to think twice about. Now hold that image next to this one. Elsewhere in the ancient world, cattle were being branded, taxed, and sold at market like any other good. The same species, worshipped in one temple, slaughtered without ceremony a few hundred miles away, sacred in one culture, currency in another. That contradiction never fully resolved. It simply traveled forward through history, waiting to resurface. As empires grew larger, the stakes attached to cattle grew with them. Rome didn't march on soldiers alone. It marched on supply lines, and cattle sat at the center of those lines. Oxen hauled the wagons that kept legions fed 1,000 miles from home. Leather from cattle hide covered shields, armor, and sandals. Controlling grazing land wasn't a side detail of Roman expansion. In many campaigns, it was the point. Centuries later, in medieval Europe, entire villages built their yearly rhythm around cattle. Spring calving, summer grazing, autumn slaughter, winter rationing. A community's survival through the coldest months could hinge on how well its herd had fared that year. Then, in 1889, that dependency turned into catastrophe. A disease called rinderpest, sometimes known as cattle plague, entered East Africa and spread with terrifying speed. Healthy herds sickened within days. Imagine walking out to a paddock one morning to find animals that had been grazing peacefully the night before now too weak to stand, their breathing shallow, flies gathering at their eyes. Farmers watched animals that represented an entire family's food, labor, and savings collapse in the fields. Milk disappeared from households that had relied on it every morning of their lives. Fields that needed oxen to be plowed sat untouched. What followed, according to many historians, was famine on a devastating scale. Some historical estimates suggest that, in certain affected communities, mortality may have reached catastrophic levels, though the exact figures remain debated among scholars. This wasn't only a loss of animals, it was the simultaneous collapse of food, farm labor, transportation, and inherited wealth all at once across communities that had built their entire way of life around a single species. And weakened populations, stripped of the economic and physical strength their herds once provided, became far more vulnerable to outside powers already circling the region. A number of historians argue that the rinderpest epidemic significantly accelerated the colonization of East Africa, Because it dismantled the very foundation that had allowed local societies to resist for so long. A virus, cattle, and the political map of a continent quietly redrawn. On the other side of the ocean, cattle were writing a very different chapter, one soaked in dust, danger, and contradiction. After the American Civil War, as railroads pushed westward and demand for beef surged in northern cities, the open plains of Texas became the starting point for one of the most mythologized industries in American history. Out of it came the cowboy, an image now stamped across film, fashion, and folklore. But the reality behind that image was far harder than the legend suggests. Dust thick enough to choke on, nights spent sleeping in the open with one eye on a herd that could bolt at the sound of thunder. Many of the men driving those herds across hundreds of miles of open country were Black, Mexican, and Native American, a fact largely erased from the popular version of the story. They faced stampedes that could kill in seconds, river crossings that swallowed men and cattle alike, and months of exhausting, dangerous labor for wages that rarely matched the risk. Meanwhile, a small class of cattle barons built enormous fortunes from that same labor. Freedom, danger, wealth, and exploitation, all riding the same trail at once, and the cost extended far beyond the men on horseback. As cattle ranching expanded across the plains, it collided directly with the buffalo herds that native nations had depended on for thousands of years. Buffalo populations were driven toward near extinction, in part to clear land for grazing cattle, and in part as a deliberate strategy to weaken native resistance. An entire way of life, built over centuries, was dismantled alongside the animal it depended on. Expansion for one group meant devastation for another, and cattle sat at the center of both outcomes. By the 20th century, the intimate seasonal relationship between farmer and herd had been replaced by something faster and colder. Refrigerated rail cars carried beef across entire countries. Massive feedlots replaced open range. Selective breeding pushed milk and meat production to levels no ancient farmer could have imagined. What had once been a slow, personal bond stretching back 10,000 years became an industrial system, precise, efficient, and largely invisible to the people who relied on it every day. Today, there are more than 1.5 billion cattle on Earth, roughly 1 for every 5 people alive. Beef, dairy, and leather move through economies worth hundreds of billions of dollars a year, so woven into daily life that most people never pause to consider where any of it began. And here is the turn nobody saw coming. The same animal that once represented pure survival, that fed early farmers, funded ancient economies, and became sacred to entire religions, is now at the center of one of the most urgent conversations about the planet's future. Scientists studying global greenhouse gas emissions have identified livestock farming, cattle among the largest contributors, as a significant source of methane, a gas that traps heat far more effectively than carbon dioxide in the short term. It would be an oversimplification to say cattle alone are responsible for climate change. The picture involves global agriculture, land use, and energy systems as a whole. But cattle sit undeniably near the center of that picture, an animal once seen purely as a blessing, now folded into questions about humanity's environmental future. The animal that helped build civilization may now be one of the forces pushing civilization to rethink how it survives. Step back far enough, and the shape of the whole story becomes hard to miss. An animal domesticated by nameless people in a river valley became the difference between hunger and surplus. Surplus became wealth. Wealth became conflict, and status and sacred meaning, sometimes all three at once, depending on which side of the world you stood on. Empires built supply lines around it. A virus reshaped a continent through it. An entire mythology grew up around men who risked their lives moving it across open land, while the people who depended on a different animal for survival paid the price for that expansion. And now, in a final twist few could have predicted, it sits at the heart of a conversation about the future of the planet itself. None of this was planned by any single ruler, inventor, or genius. It was built slowly by farmers, priests, warriors, ranchers, and ordinary families who were simply trying to get through one more season, one more winter, one more year. So picture that same animal again, standing quietly in a field, chewing grass, staring at nothing in particular. It looks like nothing. It has always looked like nothing. But behind that stillness sits 10,000 years of agriculture, empire, religion, war, industry, and now an uncertain climate future, not simply an animal. The animal that helped build civilization. If this changed the way you'll look at a cow the next time you pass one, subscribe to Origin Tales, because history is full of ordinary things carrying extraordinary weight, and this channel exists to find them.